Imagine a world deep under the sea, a place we know little about. Could mermaids, that magical half-human, half-fish beings, actually live there? The documentary, Mermaids: The Body Found, says yes, and it's got people talking. Scientists, doubters, and dreamers are all asking the same question. Could mermaids be real? A historical perspective. The story of mermaids began long before they were popularized by Disney or featured in Hollywood movies. In fact, the first depictions of mermaids were found in ancient caves, dating back to the late Paleolithic era, about 30,000 years ago. That's right, our ancestors were so captivated by these creatures that they painted them on cave walls. Imagine what it must have been like to sail the uncharted waters back then, with the belief that mermaids could be lurking below the surface. Now, let's travel to ancient Greece, where mermaids were initially considered half woman and half bird. But these mermaids were not loners. They often appeared in groups, sitting on reefs and waiting for ships to pass by. They were like the welcoming committee of the sea, except their intentions were not always so welcoming. Speaking of intentions, the Greek name for mermaids, siren, is related to the word for rope. Why? Because these creatures were believed to tie or grab sailors with their enchanting songs. These melodies were so irresistible that they promised everything but delivered nothing, leading many sailors to their doom. But their allure wasn't just in their voices, it was also in their femininity. They were the ultimate seductresses, living between two worlds, the sea and the earth, and even between life and death. In some cultures, mermaids were seen as funeral emblems, their songs guiding souls to the afterlife. But Greece wasn't the only place where mermaids made a splash. In the Middle East, around 1000 BC, the Syrian goddess Atargatis ruled the seas and was often depicted as a mermaid. Temples dedicated to her were filled with large ponds where fish were kept, perhaps as a tribute to her dual nature. In China, mermaids were seen as wonderful, skilled, and versatile beings whose tears turned into pearls. Then there are also the British Isles, where each region had its own version of mermaids. In Ireland, they were called merrows and had membranes on their hands. In Scotland, there was the siege, a special kind of mermaid with the lower half of a salmon. Even Wales had its own mermaid tale, where a mermaid named Murga was captured and taught to speak the native language. She learned to sew and talk, but never lost her ability to live in the water. Talk about adaptability. Sightings and claims, more than just fairy tales. Now, fast forward to the 18th century, where the infamous pirate Blackbeard is jotting down notes in his logbook about mermaids. This wasn't a man known for his flights of fancy. He was a pirate who struck fear into the hearts of many. Yet, here he was, instructing his crew to steer clear of certain waters he labeled as enchanted due to mermaid sightings. If a pirate as fearsome as Blackbeard took mermaids seriously, shouldn't we? But the tales don't stop there. Christopher Columbus, the man credited with discovering America, had his own mermaid tale to tell. While sailing off the coast of Hispaniola in 1493, he claimed to have seen 3 mermaids. But here's the twist: he didn't find them beautiful. Historians speculate that he might have seen manatees, but the question remains: what did Columbus actually see that day? The mystery deepens as we move through history to World War II, a time of many horrors, but also its share of mysteries. Japanese soldiers stationed in the Kai Islands of Indonesia reported multiple sightings of creatures they called manfish or orang-ikan. These weren't your typical mermaids. They were described as being 150 centimeters tall with spikes on their spine, shoulders, and neck. The soldiers even had a close encounter with these beings, leading to a flurry of gunshots. Despite attempts to involve the scientific community, the story faded into obscurity after the war. The intrigue continues into more recent times. In 1967, tourists on a ferry near Main Island were stunned to see a blonde mermaid on a beach. She was casually eating raw salmon, seemingly enjoying her day. The sighting was so compelling that Charles White from the Undersea Gardens offered a $25,000 reward for her capture. Despite the hefty sum, the mermaid was never found, and the story eventually died down. But the sightings didn't stop there. Jeff Leitcher, a diver and videographer, claimed to have not just seen but photographed a mermaid off the coast of Kauai. He was part of a group of 10 people who all claimed to have seen the same mermaid. The photo he took was analyzed by 3 high-profile photography labs, all of which confirmed its authenticity. So, is this the proof we've been waiting for? The government of Israel seemed to think so, or at least they were willing to entertain the idea. In 2009, they offered a $1 million reward for proof of a mermaid's existence after multiple sightings were reported in in Kiryat. NBC even sent a film crew to investigate, capturing footage that, while not conclusive, was deemed highly possible to be of a mermaid by experts. The reward still stands, and people continue to search, hoping to claim that million-dollar prize. And let's not forget the dam in Zimbabwe that was left unfinished in 2012 because workers and divers claimed to have seen a mermaid. The documentaries, fact or fiction? So, you've heard about the sightings and claims, but what about the documentaries that shook the world? One such program is Mermaids: The Body Found, which aired on Animal Planet in 2012. This mockumentary presented a scientific team's efforts to uncover the source behind mysterious underwater recordings. The show even went as far as to present the aquatic ape hypothesis as evidence that mermaids exist, complete with digitally manufactured videos. The program was so convincing that it drew millions of viewers, becoming one of Animal Planet's most watched telecasts. But here's the kicker: it was all speculative science mixed with fiction. The show faced criticism for blurring the lines between fact and fiction, as it was presented in a documentary style but lacked clear disclaimers about its speculative nature. But wait, there's more. A sequel called Mermaids: The New Evidence aired in 2013. This one featured Dr. Paul Robertson, who was interviewed in the first documentary. The sequel brought forward never-before-seen evidence since the release of the original program. The show claimed to have startling new video evidence of aquatic hominids. The impact? It shattered Animal Planet's rating records, pulling in 3.6 million viewers. However, much like its predecessor, this sequel was also a blend of speculative science and fiction. The show was neither a genuine documentary nor entirely fictional, leaving the audience in a state of bewilderment. So what's the deal with these documentaries? Are they just sensationalized entertainment, or do they hold a grain of truth? The programs indeed sparked debates and conversations, but they also muddied the waters of scientific understanding. The science behind the myth. Last but not the least, let's talk about the science, or maybe the lack of it, behind the idea of mermaids. You've probably heard that we've explored less than 5% of the world's oceans. That's a lot of unknowns, right? So some people, including scientists, think there might be something more human-like down there than just fish and coral. Back in the 70s and 80s, the aquatic ape theory was all the rage. It suggested that some of our ancestors might have adapted to life in the water instead of on land. Imagine that. Your great-great-great, add a few more greats, grandparents could have been swimming around, catching fish with their webbed hands. Now, you might be asking, webbed hands? Really? Well, think about it. Humans can hold their breath for a pretty long time compared to other land animals. Our fingers do get all wrinkly in water, making it easier to grip stuff. And some people are even born with webbed hands. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. But here's where it gets tricky. Just because something could be true doesn't mean it is. People who believe in mermaids often suffer from what's called confirmation bias. They only see the facts that support their belief and ignore the rest. It's like when you're convinced you're right about something, and you only listen to people who agree with you. So, are we just fooling ourselves? Or is there a chance, however slim, that there's something or someone swimming deep down in the ocean, just out of reach of our submarines and cameras? Until we explore every nook and cranny of the ocean, who's to say? If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and sharing so we can keep bringing more content like this. See you next time.